The wrench slipped from Owen Frost's hand and clattered against the metal floor. He didn't bother picking it up right away. His fingers were cramped from 6 straight hours of rewiring a mining drone's navigation system, and the dim lighting in his workshop made everything look the same shade of gray. Station Bellridge hummed around him like a living thing. Thousands of beings from dozens of species moved through its corridors, trading goods and stories and promises. Down here in the maintenance levels, Owen heard only the distant thrum of air recyclers and the occasional groan of metal settling. That was how he liked it. He finally bent to retrieve the wrench when the door chime sounded. Owen froze. Nobody came down here at this hour. The station's commercial districts were still buzzing with activity, but the industrial sectors cleared out after the second shift ended. He glanced at the wall chronometer. Nearly midnight. The chimes sounded again, more insistent this time. Owen wiped his hands on his coveralls and moved to the door panel. The security screen showed a figure that filled most of the camera's view. Scaled. Massive. One of the dragon-like aliens that most humans simply called the Scaled Ones. Though their species' name had too many clicking sounds for human throats to manage, he pressed the release and the door hissed open. The Scaled One stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in dull bronze scales that had lost their shine. Scars crisscrossed his snout and neck. One of his wings hung slightly lower than the other, the membrane torn and healed badly. His eyes were golden and sharp, taking in every detail of Owen's cluttered workshop. "I need a repair," the dragon said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Owen gestured him inside. The Scaled One had to duck to clear the doorway. He moved with a pronounced limp, favoring his left leg. "Old injury," Owen noted. "Military bearing despite the damage. War veteran, probably from the frontier conflicts." "What needs fixing?" Owen asked. The dragon reached into a worn satchel and pulled out a plasma cutter. The tool was standard issue, the kind used in salvage operations across the sector. But this one had seen better days. The power cell housing was cracked, and the focusing lens had developed a dangerous fracture. Owen took the tool and turned it over in his hands. "This could have exploded on you." The lens fracture would have sent the plasma stream in random directions. "I know," the dragon said. "That's why I came to the best mechanic on the station." Owen raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond to the compliment. He carried the plasma cutter to his main workbench and set it under a magnifying lamp. "I can have it done by morning. Standard repair fee." "Fair enough." The dragon didn't move toward the door. Instead, his golden eyes swept across the workshop, taking in the half-finished projects, the organized chaos of tools and parts, the sleeping area visible through a doorway in the back. Owen tried to ignore the scrutiny and focus on the plasma cutter. He popped open the power cell housing and began examining the internal connections. "You live here," the dragon observed. It wasn't a question. "Rent's cheaper when you combine workspace and living quarters," Owen replied without looking up. The dragon's gaze settled on something in the corner. Owen knew what he was looking at without checking. The military cargo container. 2 meters long, armored, covered in a thin layer of dust and scorch marks from welding splatter. Owen's name was stenciled on the side in faded white letters, along with a service designation number that anyone with military experience would recognize. "Human combat engineers," the dragon said softly. "I fought alongside some of your unit during the frontier wars. Fine soldiers. Better problem solvers." Owen's hands stilled on the plasma cutter. He forced himself to resume working. "That was a long time ago. 20 years, the dragon agreed. "Give or take. I'm Brass, by the way. Tactical Wing Commander, retired." Owen Frost. Mechanic. Brass made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Just a mechanic." "Of course." He shifted his weight, and Owen heard the faint scrape of claws on metal. "That container. Still sealed. Not your business." "No, I suppose it isn't." Brass moved toward the door, his limp more pronounced now. "Long day," Owen guessed. "Old wounds always hurt worse when you're tired." "I'll return in the morning for my tool." Owen nodded, relieved the conversation was ending. But Brass paused in the doorway. "The station's been having problems," the dragon said. "Equipment failures. Small things mostly, but they're getting worse. Security thinks it's just aging infrastructure, but some of us aren't so sure. Take it up with maintenance administration. Owen suggested to Brass's golden eyes met his. I might do that, or I might come back and talk to someone who actually knows how things work. He ducked through the doorway and disappeared into the corridor beyond. Owen stood alone in his workshop, the broken plasma cutter still in his hands. He should get back to work. The repair was straightforward enough, maybe 2 hours if he didn't rush. But his eyes kept drifting to that cargo container in the corner point 20 years sealed. 20 years of avoiding what was inside. Medals, probably. Commendations. The ceremonial sword they gave to combat engineers who served with distinction. All the official recognition of what he'd done during the war. What his team had done. What they died doing while he survived. Owen turned back to his workbench and picked up a micro-welder. The plasma cutter wouldn't fix itself, and dwelling on the past never helped anyone. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. Learned it in fire and vacuum and the screams of friends he couldn't save. Down here in the shadows of Station Belridge, the past stayed locked in a box where it belonged, at least. That's what Owen told himself as he worked through the night, trying not to think about the knowing look in Brass's golden eyes. Owen finished the plasma cutter repair just as Station Belridge's artificial dawn cycle began. The main lighting systems brightened gradually throughout the station, mimicking a sunrise that none of the current residents would see for months. Out here on the edge of charted space, real stars were distant and cold. He was calibrating the focusing lens when his door chimed again. Owen checked the security screen and sighed. Brass stood outside, holding 2 steaming containers. The dragon entered without waiting for an invitation this time, moving with the confidence of someone who'd already been welcomed once. He set one of the containers on Owen's workbench, carefully avoiding the delicate tools. Stimulant blend from the market level, Brass said. The clicking vendors make it strong enough to wake the dead. Owen eyed the container suspiciously, but picked it up. The liquid inside was dark and smelled faintly of spices he couldn't identify. He took a cautious sip. Heat flooded his mouth, followed by a kick of caffeine that made his eyes water. That's brutal, he muttered. That's effective. Brass settled himself against the support beam, his damaged wing folding carefully against his back. Your plasma cutter is ready? Owen gestured to the tool on his workbench. New power cell housing. Replaced the focusing lens. Recalibrated the emission matrix. Should be good for another 5 years if you don't drop it off a cargo platform. Brass examined the repair with an expert eye, then nodded his approval. He transferred the payment to Owen's account with a tap on his datapad. Excellent work. As expected, he didn't leave. Owen took another sip of the harsh stimulant and waited. He'd dealt with enough officers during his service to recognize when someone was working up to something. The equipment failures I mentioned last night, Brass began. 3 more incidents during the sleep cycle. Life support fluctuation in residential section 7. Artificial gravity hiccup in the cargo bays. Water recycling contamination in the eastern Habring. Sounds like the station's getting old. Owen said. Belridge is 40 years old. Well maintained. These failures don't match normal wear patterns. Brass's golden eyes studied Owen's face. I spent 30 years in tactical command. I know what random looks like. This isn't random. Owen set down his drink. You think it's sabotage? I think someone with technical knowledge is targeting specific systems. The failures are spaced out enough to look like coincidence, but they're escalating. Yesterday's water contamination put 15 beings in medical care. 2 of them were children. Something cold settled in Owen's stomach. Children. He'd joined the combat engineers to protect civilians, to solve the problems that kept people safe during the worst conflict humanity had ever seen. But that was then. That was before. Station security should handle it, he said. Station security is overwhelmed. Belridge handles 70,000 residents and twice that many transients during trade season. The security chief is competent, but she doesn't have the background to understand how someone might weaponize infrastructure. Brass paused. But you do. Owen stood and moved to his parts storage, putting distance between himself and the dragon. I fix things. I don't investigate sabotage. You were human combat engineers, 3rd Division. I looked you up last night. Your unit had a 97% mission success rate. You specialized in rapid infrastructure assessment and hostile environment engineering. Brass's voice was gentle but relentless. You know how to break systems, which means you know how to find someone who's breaking them. I'm not that person anymore. Really? Because that container in the corner says otherwise. Owen's hands clenched. That container stays closed. Why? Brass shifted his weight, his scales rasping softly. I've carried my own demons for 20 years, Owen Frost. I know what guilt looks like. I know what it sounds like when someone's running from their past instead of living with it. You don't know anything about me. I know you survived when others didn't. I know you left military service the day the war ended and never looked back. I know you're hiding in this workshop, fixing broken tools for strangers, because it's easier than facing what you left behind. Brass's voice softened. I know because I did the same thing for 5 years after the war. Holed up in a cave on my home world, convinced I didn't deserve to be among the living. Owen turned to face him. What changed? A hatchling fell into a ravine near my cave. She was crying for help, and her parents couldn't reach her. I had the climbing equipment. I had the experience. I could save her, or I could stay in my cave and let her die because I was too wrapped up in my own pain. You saved her. Obviously. Brass's golden eyes gleamed, and I realized that my team didn't die, so I could waste the rest of my life hiding. They died so others could live. Every day I choose to help someone, I honor their sacrifice. Every day I hide, I dishonor it. The words hit harder than Owen expected. He looked at the cargo container, at the name stenciled on its side. His name, his rank, his unit designation. Inside that box was everything he'd been, everything he'd lost. The sabotage, he said finally. Tell me about the patterns. Brass's expression didn't change, but Owen caught the slight relaxation in his posture. Victory, small but significant. The dragon pulled out his datapad and brought up a station schematic. Red markers indicated the locations of each equipment failure over the past 2 weeks. Owen studied them, his mind automatically cataloging distances, system types, access points. His blood went cold. These aren't random, he said. Look at the progression. Life support, gravity, water recycling. Someone's testing responses, seeing how fast maintenance crews react, how security investigates, where the weak points are in station operations. Testing for what? Owen traced a line on the schematic with his finger, connecting the failure points. The pattern formed a rough circle around a specific section of the station. The fusion core housing. They're mapping approach vectors, he said. If you wanted to cause catastrophic damage to Bell Ridge, you'd target the fusion core stabilizers. But you can't just walk up and plant explosives. You need to know how maintenance accesses the area, how sensors monitor it, how security patrols it. Brass leaned closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over the schematic. You're saying these small failures are reconnaissance. I'm saying whoever's doing this has military training, combat engineering training, specifically. They're gathering intelligence for a major strike. Owen met Brass's eyes. How many people are on the station right now? 70,000 residents. Another 100,000 transients for the trade season. Next week, the numbers jump higher. The Pan-Species Trade Summit starts in 6 days. Owen's mind raced. A fusion core failure during the summit would kill thousands. Tens of thousands. Species representatives from across the sector would be here, packed into conference halls and diplomatic suites. The death toll would be catastrophic. The political fallout would shatter the fragile peace that had held since the war ended. I need to think, he said. Brass nodded and moved toward the door. I'll be back tomorrow morning, with more of that stimulant blend. Brass. The dragon paused. Why me? There must be other engineers on this station with military backgrounds. There are. But I needed someone who understands what it means to carry the weight of lives saved and lives lost. Someone who knows that sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting. It's choosing to care again after you've lost everything. After Brass left, Owen stood alone in his workshop. His eyes drifted to the cargo container one more time. 20 years sealed. Maybe it was time to open it. 3 days passed before Owen admitted to himself that Brass had become a regular part of his routine. The dragon arrived every morning with stimulant blends from different market vendors, each one more aggressive than the last. They would drink in comfortable silence while Brass reported the latest incidents. The sabotage was getting bolder. The pressure seal failure in Docking Bay 12 had nearly vented an entire cargo ship's crew into space. Only quick action by the bay operators had saved them. The next day, a power relay explosion in the residential sector had started a fire that took 4 hours to contain. No fatalities yet, but the station's population was getting nervous. Owen spread a series of data pads across his workbench, each displaying different station systems. He'd been analyzing failure reports for 3 nights straight, barely sleeping. His eyes felt like someone had rubbed sand into them. "You look terrible," Brass observed from his usual spot against the support beam. "Thanks for the input." Owen highlighted another section on the power grid schematic. "Look at this. The relay that exploded yesterday was a redundant backup. Shouldn't have been carrying any load at all. Someone rerouted power through it deliberately, knowing it would overload, which means they have access to station operations systems. Not just access, deep access. The kind that requires either high-level security clearance or serious hacking skills." Owen rubbed his face. "I ran the failure timeline against maintenance schedules. Every incident happened during shift changes or when crews were responding to other issues. Perfect timing. Too perfect." Brass shifted his weight, his damaged wing rustling. "You think they're monitoring security communications? I think they're monitoring everything. And I think they're getting ready for the main event." Owen pulled up the station's event calendar. The Panspecies Trade Summit was 3 days away. Summit preparations are in full swing. Thousands of additional security personnel, diplomatic staff, journalists. The station's population is going to spike by another 50,000 beings in the next 72 hours. "Maximum casualties," Brass said quietly. "Maximum political damage if species leaders die." Owen nodded. His stomach had been twisted in knots since he'd figured out the probable timeline. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to destroy Belridge. They were trying to reignite the kind of interspecies conflict that had fueled the frontier wars. His datapad chimed with an incoming message. Station Security Chief Petra Volkov wanted to meet with him. Owen stared at the message, his finger hovering over the decline button. "You have to talk to her eventually," Brass said. "I told you I consult. I've been consulting. That doesn't mean I need to get officially involved." "Owen," the dragon's voice was firm. "You've identified a credible threat against 70,000 residents and another 150,000 summit attendees. Consulting time is over. This is the moment where you decide if you're going to help or hide." The words stung because they were true. Owen had spent 3 days analyzing the sabotage pattern, 3 sleepless nights piecing together the threat. And he'd done it all from the safety of his workshop. Like he could solve the problem without actually stepping into the light. His eyes drifted to the cargo container. Still sealed. Still covered in dust. But now it felt less like a locked box and more like a question waiting to be answered. "Fine," he said. "Set up the meeting." Petra Volkov's office was exactly what Owen expected from a career security officer. Efficient, organized, and decorated with commendations from a dozen different law enforcement organizations. She stood when Owen and Brass entered, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "Mr. Frost, Commander Brass, thank you for coming." She gestured to chairs that were clearly designed for human-sized occupants. Brass settled himself against the wall instead. Owen took a seat and waited. He learned long ago that in meetings with authority figures, silence was often the best strategy. Petra didn't waste time. "Commander Brass says you have information about the equipment failures." "Not information. Analysis." Owen pulled out his datapad and transferred his findings to her desk display. "The failures aren't random. They're reconnaissance for a larger attack, probably targeting the fusion core stabilizers during the summit." Petra's expression didn't change, but Owen saw her hands tighten slightly on her desk. She studied his analysis in silence, her eyes moving rapidly across the data. "This is solid work," she said finally. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" "I wasn't sure until yesterday. And I'm not a security consultant. I fix broken equipment. You were human combat engineers." Petra pulled up his service record on a secondary screen. 3rd Division, specialized in hostile environment engineering and infrastructure warfare. Distinguished Service Citation. Honorable discharge. She paused. Your entire unit was killed during the evacuation of Colony 7. You were the only survivor. Owen's throat tightened. He hadn't heard that designation spoken aloud in 20 years. Colony 7. The place where everything ended. That's in the past, he managed. The past is informing the present. Petra closed the service record. Someone with your training is behind this sabotage. Someone who knows how combat engineers think, how they operate. I need you to find them before they kill everyone on this station. I'm not an investigator. No, but you're an engineer. You understand how they're thinking because you think the same way. You can predict their next move. Petra leaned forward. I have 3 days before this station is packed with diplomatic targets. My security teams are good, but they're not trained for this kind of threat. I need your expertise. Owen looked at Brass. The dragon's golden eyes were steady, encouraging without being pushy. He looked back at Petra, at the determination in her face, at the weight of responsibility. She was carrying 70,000 residents, 150,000 summit attendees, all of them depending on people like Petra to keep them safe, all of them unaware of the catastrophe being prepared in the shadows. His team had died saving people. They'd walked into hell because someone needed to, because civilians were counting on them, because it was the right thing to do even when it cost everything. I'll need access to the fusion core maintenance tunnels, Owen said, and complete station schematics, including security systems. Petra's shoulders relaxed slightly. Done. What else? Time. If they're planning to strike during the summit, they need to finish their preparations. That means they'll be moving soon, making final adjustments to their sabotage setup. I need to inspect the most vulnerable points before they do. I'll assign you a security escort. No, an escort will draw attention. If the saboteur is monitoring security communications, they'll know someone's looking for them. Owen stood. I'll go alone. Brass can coordinate with your teams if I find something. Petra clearly didn't like it, but she nodded. You'll have full access credentials within the hour. Report directly to me with anything you find. Owen and Brass left the office together. The dragon waited until they were in a maintenance lift before speaking. You're going to find them, Brass said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to try. And if you do, Owen thought about his team, about the people they'd saved, about the weight of survival and the responsibility it carried. Then I'll stop them, whatever it takes. The lift descended into the lower levels of the station, carrying Owen toward the fusion core and whatever waited in the shadows below. The maintenance tunnels beneath Station Belridge formed a maze that only engineers and desperate criminals ever navigated. Owen moved through them with practiced ease, his portable scanner sweeping for anomalies in the infrastructure. Every pipe, every conduit, every power coupling was a potential weapon in the right hands or the wrong ones. He'd been searching for 6 hours, checking each fusion core access point against his mental map of likely sabotage locations. The work was tedious and his back ached from crawling through narrow passages, but combat engineers had taught him patience. You didn't rush when lives were on the line. Substation 7 sat at the intersection of 3 major power feeds. Owen approached it carefully, his scanner already picking up unusual readings. The door to the substation control room was sealed, but his security credentials opened it without issue. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Banks of monitoring equipment hummed quietly, their displays showing green status indicators across the board. But Owen's scanner told a different story. He moved to the primary coupling housing and ran a detailed sweep there. Microscopic fractures in the coupling assembly, too precise to be natural wear. He pulled a magnification lens from his toolkit and examined the metal closely. The fractures followed a deliberate pattern, weakening the structure without causing immediate failure. A slow bomb, waiting for the right stress to trigger catastrophic collapse. Owen's hands moved automatically, falling into the familiar rhythm of disarmament. He'd done this dozens of times during the war, defusing enemy sabotage while his team held off attacks or evacuated civilians. His fingers didn't shake. His breathing stayed steady. Training overrode fear, turned panic into procedure. The fractures were created by molecular disruptors, tiny devices that vibrated at frequencies designed to stress metal until it developed critical weaknesses. Owen found 3 of them embedded in the coupling housing, each one carefully positioned for maximum damage. He deactivated them one by one, using a frequency dampener to neutralize their effect before carefully extracting them. When the last device was removed, Owen sat back and allowed himself a moment of relief. The immediate danger was gone, but the larger threat remained. Someone had planted these devices, someone with expertise and access. Someone who was probably watching the substations for any sign of interference. A soft scraping sound made Owen freeze. He wasn't alone. Owen spun, reaching for the heavy wrench in his toolkit. A figure in black stealth gear stood in the doorway, their face hidden behind a featureless mask. They moved fast, covering the distance between them in 2 quick steps. Owen barely got his wrench up in time to block a strike aimed at his head. The fight was brutal and brief. His opponent was trained, but Owen had 20 years of muscle memory from combat engineer close-quarters combat drills. He used the confined space to his advantage, blocking another strike and countering with a blow to the attacker's knee. They stumbled, and Owen followed up with a shoulder check that slammed them against the monitoring console. The attacker's hand went to their belt, reaching for something. A weapon, probably. Owen didn't give them the chance. He swept their legs and brought them down hard, then pinned them with his weight while grabbing for the object at their belt. The T wasn't a weapon. It was a data storage device. The attacker realized their mistake and fought harder, desperate to retrieve the device. Owen held on, and in the struggle the device fell loose, skittering across the floor. The attacker's priorities shifted immediately. They abandoned the fight, scrambling for the fallen device. Owen lunged and caught their ankle. They kicked free and dove for the data storage, fingers closing around it just as Owen tackled them again. But this time, they were ready. An elbow caught Owen in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, the attacker was up and running. Owen gave chase, but his opponent knew these tunnels. They disappeared around a corner, and by the time Owen reached it, they were gone. He stood in the empty corridor, breathing hard, his ribs aching where he'd been hit. But he wasn't empty-handed. During the struggle, the data storage device had broken open, scattering its contents. Owen knelt and gathered what remained. A damaged memory chip, cracked but possibly recoverable. He slipped it into his toolkit and made his way back to the surface levels. Brass was waiting in Owen's workshop, along with Petrovolkov. They both stood when he entered, taking in his disheveled appearance and the darkening bruise on his face. "You found something," Brass said. Owen set his toolkit on the workbench and pulled out the deactivated molecular disruptors. Substation 7 was rigged to fail. These devices would have caused the coupling to fracture under load. During the summit, when power demand spikes, the whole substation would have exploded. Petra examined the devices with a grim expression. "How many other substations are rigged?" "I don't know, but I had a visitor. Someone in stealth gear who didn't want me finding their work." Owen pulled out the damaged memory chip. "They dropped this during our fight. It might have information about their other targets. Can you recover the data?" Petra asked. "Maybe. Give me an hour." Owen was already setting up his data recovery equipment. His hands worked automatically while his mind raced through possibilities. The saboteur had been waiting at Substation 7, which meant they were monitoring station systems closely. They'd known Owen was coming, or at least suspected someone might investigate. Brass and Petra watched in silence as Owen worked. The memory chip was badly damaged, but he'd recovered data from worse during the war. Patience and precision were everything. One wrong move, and the remaining information would be permanently corrupted. After 40 minutes, his equipment beeped softly. Success! The recovered data appeared on his display. Station schematics covered in annotations and calculations. Sabotage schedules listing the locations and timing of planted devices. Notes written in clipped military shorthand that Owen recognized immediately. Combat engineer terminology. Tactical assessments. Efficiency calculations that prioritized maximum damage with minimum exposure. "They're one of us," Owen said quietly. "Whoever's doing this, they were trained the same way I was." Petra leaned over his shoulder, studying the data. "Can you identify them from this?" "No. but I can identify their targets. Owen highlighted several locations on the schematic. They've planted devices at 7 different substations, all of them surrounding the fusion core. If they trigger simultaneously during the summit, the cascade failure will destroy the core containment. The explosion will tear the station apart. When Petra's voice was tight, Owen checked the timeline and the recovered data. His blood went cold. Tomorrow, opening ceremonies for the summit. Maximum attendance, maximum casualties. Brass moved closer to the display. We have less than 24 hours to find and disarm 7 sabotage setups, yes, and to identify the saboteur before they trigger everything remotely. Owen met Petra's eyes. I can disarm the devices. I've done it before, but I need time and I need to work alone. If the saboteur sees security teams moving on the substations, they'll trigger early. You can't disarm 7 locations by yourself in one day, Petra objected. No, but I can prioritize. The 3 substations closest to the residential sectors get cleared first, then the ones near the summit venues. If I run out of time, at least we minimize casualties. Brass rumbled a low sound of disagreement. And if the saboteur catches you alone again, next time they might not run. Owen touched the ceremonial sword location on his mental map. The cargo container in the corner. Still sealed after 20 years, but not for much longer. Then I'll be ready, he said. Petra studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Do what you need to do, Mr. Frost. I'll keep security teams on standby in case you need backup. But you're right about discretion. We can't risk spooking our saboteur. After Petra left, Brass remained. The dragon watched Owen gather equipment, filling his toolkit with disarmament tools and scanning devices. You're going to open it tonight, Brass said. The container. Owen paused in his preparations. Yeah, I think it's time. What changed? I realized something during that fight. My team died doing what combat engineers do. Protecting people, solving impossible problems, making sure others could live. Owen looked at the cargo container. Hiding from that doesn't honor them. Using what they taught me, what we all learned together, that's how I keep them alive. Brass nodded slowly. I'll help you with the substations tomorrow. You're not trained for this. No, but I can watch your back while you work. I can make sure you're not alone when the saboteur comes. The dragon's golden eyes were steady. That's what friends do. Owen felt something in his chest that he hadn't experienced in 20 years. Not quite hope, not quite peace, but something close to both. All right, he said. Tomorrow morning, we start with residential sector substations. After Brass left, Owen stood before the cargo container. His hand rested on the seal release. 20 years of avoidance finally coming to an end. He pressed the button and the container opened. Inside the container lay everything Owen had tried to forget. Metals in velvet cases, their metal still gleaming despite 2 decades of storage. Commendations from 3 different species governments, thanking the human combat engineer for their service during the war. Letters from civilians his team had saved, their words of gratitude written in shaking hands. And the sword IT rested in a custom sheath, the blade etched with names. 47 names. Every member of Owen's unit who had died during the war, with the last 8 names grouped together at the base of the blade. Colony 7. The final mission. The evacuation that had saved 3,000 civilians and cost Owen everyone he loved. He lifted the sword carefully. The weight was familiar, comforting in a way he hadn't expected. During the war, combat engineers wore their ceremonial swords during formal occasions, but Owen had trained with his. Had used it to cut through debris and pry open jam doors. Had worn it on missions as a reminder of what he was fighting for. The names caught the workshop's dim lighting. Owen read each one, remembering faces and voices and the particular way each person had laughed. Rodriguez, who could fix anything with duct tape and optimism. Singh, who sang old Earth songs while working. Park, who had saved Owen's life twice and never let him forget it. All gone. All dead because Owen had made the call to hold the evac zone while civilians loaded onto transports. All sacrificed so others could live. I'm sorry I hid from this, Owen said to the empty workshop. I'm sorry I wasted so much time. The sword had no answers, but Owen felt something shift inside himself anyway. Grief would always be there. Guilt would always whisper that he should have died with them. But Brass was right. His team hadn't died, so Owen could waste the rest of his life in hiding. They died so people could live, and honoring that meant choosing to help when it mattered. Owen strapped the sword to his belt. Not for fighting. As a reminder that he spent the rest of the night preparing, checking, and rechecking his equipment, memorizing the substation locations and access routes. By the time artificial dawn brightened the station, Owen was ready. Brass arrived with stimulant blend and a grim expression. Security reported another incident overnight. Minor power fluctuation in the summit hall. Probably the saboteur making final adjustments. We're testing to see if anyone's watching. Owen handed Brass a spare toolkit. You carry this. If I'm working on disarmament, I need someone watching for trouble. The dragon took the toolkit and his eyes went to the sword at Owen's belt. He didn't comment, but Owen saw approval in his expression. They started with the residential sector substations. Owen worked quickly but carefully, his hands steady as he located and removed molecular disruptors from critical systems. Each device followed the same pattern, the same tactical thinking. Whoever planted them knew exactly what they were doing. Brass stood guard while Owen worked, his massive frame blocking the narrow maintenance passages and his sharp hearing alert for any approach. They made a good team, falling into a rhythm that felt natural despite their different backgrounds. By midday, they'd cleared 3 substations. Owen's back ached and his eyes burned from the close work, but they were making progress. For more to go, and still no sign of the saboteur. The 4th substation was in the commercial district, hidden behind a popular market area. Owen accessed the maintenance passage while Brass positioned himself at the entrance, his bulk making it impossible for anyone to pass without being noticed. Owen worked quickly, his scanner picking up the familiar signatures of molecular disruptors. He'd just started the disarmament process when his comm unit chirped. Brass's voice came through, tight with warning. Someone's coming. Fast. Wearing the same stealth gear you described. Owen's hands didn't stop moving. Can you block them? Already am. But Owen, there's something else. I recognize the movement pattern. Military tactical approach. Whoever this is, they're very well trained. The disruptor came free and Owen moved to the second one. His heart rate picked up, but his hands stayed steady. Training overrode adrenaline. Focus overrode fear. Ray's voices echoed from the passage entrance. Brass and someone else. The words indistinct, but the tone confrontational. Owen finished with the second disruptor and moved to the third. Almost done. The voices grew louder. Then came the sound of impact, scales scraping against metal, and Brass's grunt of pain. The saboteur had gotten past him. Owen looked up to see the figure in stealth gear entering the substation. They moved differently now, less cautious and more desperate. Their hand went to their belt, and Owen saw what he'd missed during their first encounter. A remote trigger. Don't, Owen said, rising to his feet with the third disruptor still in place. You trigger now, you'll kill yourself too. We're right next to the core. The saboteur's hand hesitated on the trigger. Through the mask, Owen couldn't see their face, but he could read body language. Tension, desperation, the posture of someone who'd committed too deeply to stop. I know you're combat engineers, Owen continued, his voice calm. I know because I am too. 3rd Division. I recognize your work. The precision, the tactical thinking. You were trained to save lives, same as me. Save lives. The voice was distorted by the mask, but the bitterness came through clearly. I watched my family die in a human military strike. Collateral damage, they called it. 3 children. My spouse. Gone because some human officer decided their target was worth civilian casualties. Owen's throat tightened. Colony 7 had been full of similar stories. People caught between military necessity and the brutal mathematics of war. People who suffered because someone like him had to make impossible choices. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry for what happened to your family. I lost people too. My entire team died during an evacuation. They sacrificed themselves so others could live, and I've spent 20 years wondering why I survived when they didn't. Then you understand. The saboteur's hand tightened on the trigger. You understand why this has to happen, why the peace has to break, why humans need to pay for what they've done. No. Owen took a careful step forward. I understand pain. I understand loss. But I also understand that my team didn't die, so I could waste their sacrifice on revenge. They died saving people, protecting civilians, making sure kids got to grow up and families stay together. He gestured to the substation around them. You trigger this, you'll kill thousands. Humans, yes, but also clicking merchants, gaseous whisper diplomats, scaled ones like Brass, children from a dozen different species who had nothing to do with what happened to your family. Collateral damage, the saboteur said. Just like my children were collateral damage. Then you're no better than the people who killed them. Owen's voice was hard now. You're using the same logic, the same justification. You're becoming exactly what you hate. The hand on the trigger wavered. My team's names are on this sword, Owen said, touching the blade at his belt. 47 people I loved. 47 people who believed protecting others mattered more than revenge. They were right. Your family would want you to be better than this. They want you to honor their memory by choosing life over death. Brass appeared in the doorway, one wing held at an awkward angle, but his eyes alert. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. The saboteurs stood frozen for a long moment. Then, slowly, their hand moved away from the trigger. The fight went out of their posture, replaced by something that looked like exhaustion. I'm tired, they said quietly. I'm so tired of carrying this. I know. Owen moved closer, carefully removing the trigger from their belt. Let it go. Let us help you. The saboteur sank to their knees. Owen removed their mask, revealing a clicking face, their multiple eyes glistening with moisture. Young, he realized, barely an adult when the war ended, carrying grief and rage for 20 years, letting it poison everything. My name is Owen Frost, he said gently, and I'm going to get you help. Real help, not punishment. Help. Petra arrived with security teams 10 minutes later. She took custody of the saboteur personally, her expression grim but not unkind when Owen explained what had happened. We'll get them to medical and psychological services, she promised. They'll face charges, but we'll make sure they get treatment too. After security left, Owen and Brass remained in the substation. The dragon cradled his injured wing, but his golden eyes were steady. You talked them down, Brass said. You could have fought, could have just disarmed the trigger and let security handle it. But you talked them down. They deserved better than to die in hate. Owen looked at the sword at his belt. My team taught me that protecting people isn't just about solving technical problems. It's about seeing the person behind the problem. Brass nodded slowly. 3 more substations to clear. 3 more. Then we can rest. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, clearing each remaining sabotage setup. By the time artificial night fell over Station Bell Ridge, every molecular disruptor was removed and the fusion core was secure. Owen stood in his workshop, exhausted but satisfied. The sword hung on the wall now, visible, no longer hidden in a box. A reminder of who he'd been, who he still was, and what really mattered. Tomorrow the summit would begin. Thousands of beings would gather in peace, unaware of how close they'd come to catastrophe. That was fine. Owen didn't need recognition. He just needed to know he'd done what his team would have wanted to. He'd protected people. He'd solved an impossible problem, and he'd stepped out of the shadows to do it. The Pan-Species Trade Summit opened with speeches from representatives of 17 different governments. Owen watched the opening ceremonies on a monitor in his workshop, relieved to see everything proceeding smoothly. Security teams moved through the crowds with professional efficiency. Diplomats exchanged greetings and discussed treaties. The station hummed with peaceful activity. Nobody knew how close they'd come to dying. Owen turned off the monitor and returned to his current project. A mining drone's power coupling needed replacement. Straightforward work that let his mind wander. He'd spent the past 2 days finishing the repairs he'd neglected during the sabotage crisis. Life was returning to normal, or at least to what passed for normal in his workshop. The door chimed and Brass entered without waiting for an invitation. That had become their routine over the past week. The dragon brought stimulant blends and company, and Owen found he didn't mind either one anymore. Petra wants to see you, Brass said, settling against his usual support beam. Something about an official commendation. Owen grimaced. I already told her no public recognition. I did what needed doing. That's enough. She knows. This is private. Just a thank you from the station administration. Brass paused. She's also offering you a position. Chief Engineering Consultant. Full access to station systems. Authority to investigate and resolve infrastructure problems. Generous salary. I'm not interested in being staff. She thought you'd say that. So she made an alternative offer. Independent contractor status. You work when you want on the problems you find interesting. No schedule. No direct supervisor. Just Owen Frost doing what Owen Frost does best. Owen set down his tools and looked at the dragon. You helped set this up. I may have suggested a few terms. Brass's golden eyes gleamed. You're good at what you do. The station needs people like you. And hiding down here, fixing mining drones, seems like a waste of your talents. I wasn't hiding. I was working. You were hiding, Brass corrected gently. But not anymore. You've got your sword on the wall now. Time to decide what comes next. Owen glanced at the ceremonial blade hanging beside his workbench. The names etched into it caught the workshop lighting. 47 reminders of people who'd chosen to matter. His team hadn't hidden from hard choices. They'd faced them, solved them, and died doing what needed to be done. Independent contractor, Owen said finally. I help when needed, but I keep my workshop and my freedom. Petra anticipated that answer. She's prepared a contract. Brass pulled a datapad from his satchel and set it on the workbench. Take your time reading it. She doesn't need an answer immediately. Owen picked up the datapad and skimmed the contract terms. Fair compensation, complete autonomy, access to resources when needed. It was exactly the kind of arrangement that would let him help without feeling trapped by bureaucracy. What about you? He asked Brass. What happens when the summit ends and you go back to whatever retirement cave you crawled out of? The dragon made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. Funny story about that. I've been thinking about staying on Bellridge, opening a consulting business, security assessments, tactical analysis for merchant ships, that sort of thing. Consulting business. I need a partner, someone with technical expertise to complement my tactical background, someone who understands infrastructure and problem solving. Brass met Owen's eyes. Someone I trust to watch my back when things get complicated. Owen felt a smile tugging at his mouth, the first genuine smile in longer than he could remember. You're asking me to go into business with you. I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement between two professionals who work well together. Brass's tone was formal, but his eyes showed warmth. Also, yes, I'm asking you to be my business partner. Owen looked around his workshop. The cluttered space had been his refuge for 20 years, his hiding place from a world that demanded too much. But it didn't have to be a refuge anymore. It could be a base of operations, a place where he and Brass solve problems and help people. I'll need to expand the workshop, he said. Add space for your equipment. Maybe install better communication systems. I'll cover half the renovation costs. Deal. Owen extended his hand and Brass grasped it carefully, mindful of his claws against human skin. They shook on it, sealing a partnership that felt right in ways Owen couldn't quite explain. Over the next week, the workshop transformed. Owen cleared out 20 years of accumulated clutter, organized his tools properly, and installed the communications equipment Brass requisitioned from his military contacts. The dragon moved his personal belongings into a storage area that Owen converted into living quarters, and together they set up a proper office space for their new consulting business, Brass and Frost Technical Solutions. The name was Brass's idea, and Owen had to admit it had a certain ring to it. Their first client was a merchant captain whose cargo hauler kept experiencing mysterious power fluctuations. Owen diagnosed the problem in 20 minutes and had it fixed in an hour. Simple work, but satisfying. The captain paid them promptly and promised to recommend their services to other merchants. Word spread quickly. Within 2 weeks, they had a steady stream of clients, from individual ship owners to small trading companies. Nothing dramatic, just honest work solving real problems. Owen found he enjoyed it. Enjoyed using his skills to help people without the weight of military command or life and death stakes. Although those stakes still appeared occasionally. 3 weeks after the summit, Petra contacted them about suspicious modifications to a private vessel docked at the station. The ship's owner claimed they were legitimate upgrades, but station security suspected weapons smuggling. Owen and Brass investigated together, combining Owen's technical analysis with Brass's tactical expertise. They found weapons, all right. Enough firepower to threaten a small colony. But they also found evidence that the ship's owner was being coerced by a criminal organization. Owen and Brass worked with Petra to expose the organization and protect the ship's owner from retaliation. More cases followed. A sabotaged life support system on a passenger liner. A hijacked cargo shipment that needed tracking. A diplomatic dispute over station access that required neutral technical arbitration. Each problem was different, each solution unique. Owen and Brass handled them all, their partnership growing stronger with every challenge they faced. 5 months after the summit, Owen stood in his workshop watching Brass teach a young clicking engineer how to diagnose power coupling failures. The dragon was patient and thorough, his tactical mind breaking down complex problems into understandable steps. The student listened with all 4 eyes focused intently, mandibles clicking softly in concentration. Owen's sword hung on the wall nearby, visible to everyone who entered the workshop. People asked about it, sometimes curious about the names etched into the blade. Owen told them the truth. His team, his family, the people who taught him that solving problems and protecting others was worth any sacrifice. The past didn't hurt as much anymore. The guilt was still there, probably always would be. But it was balanced now by purpose, by the daily choice to use what his team had taught him to make things better. Petra stopped by that evening with news. The Trade Summit is planning a follow-up session next year. They want to hold it on Belridge again, and they specifically requested that you and Brass handle security consultation. Just consultation. Owen asked, well, active monitoring during the event. Problem solving if issues arise. You'd have full authority to act on any threats. Petra smiled. Basically, they want you two to do what you did last time, except with official recognition and actual payment. Owen looked at Brass, who had finished his lesson and was bidding farewell to the young clicking engineer. The dragon caught his glance and nodded slightly. We'll do it, Owen said. Send us the contract details. After Petra left, Brass joined Owen at the workbench. They stood in comfortable silence, watching station traffic flow past the workshop's open door. Beings from dozens of species passed by, going about their lives, unaware of the 2 former soldiers who'd chosen to protect them. You know what I realized? Owen said finally. My team didn't die, so I could spend the rest of my life suffering. They died so people could live freely, without fear. Every day, I choose to help someone. Every problem I solve. That's me honoring their sacrifice. Took you long enough to figure it out? Brass rumbled. Yeah, well, I had a good teacher. Owen gestured at the workshop, at the sword on the wall, at the life he'd built. This is better than hiding. Better than pretending the past doesn't matter. Much better. Although your coffee is still terrible. It's stimulant blend, not coffee. And you're the one who introduced me to it. They fell into their usual bickering, comfortable and familiar. Outside, Station Belridge continued its endless rotation, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Inside the workshop, 2 veterans had found peace not by forgetting their past, but by using it to build something better. Owen Frost had spent 20 years working in shadows, hiding from the weight of survival and loss. But Brass had shown him that some shadows were meant to be stepped out of. That carrying the past didn't mean being crushed by it. That choosing to help others wasn't a burden, but a privilege. The ceremonial sword would always hang on his wall, names gleaming in the workshop light. A reminder of what he'd lost and what he'd learned. A symbol of the team that had taught him to solve impossible problems and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And every day, Owen and Brass opened their workshop door, ready to face whatever challenges came their way. That sword reminded him why it mattered. Not because he owed the dead anything, but because the living deserved someone who gave a damn about keeping them safe. That was worth coming out of the shadows for. That was worth everything.